Cosmic here, welcome back to the channel, and today we're finally going to talk about some Bleach decks, or actually overall archetypes and kind of high-level thoughts on them. So this video is admittedly going to be a little bit different than my Hunter x Hunter video, which I've covered previously, where I went over 6 different deck lists. But by comparison, Bleach, as the least in Volume 1, it's more about just making the best out of what we have for each color and kind of playing whatever you want. It's not as cut and dry as we saw with the Hunter x Hunter lists. So these are going to be just 3 starter lists to get you going, and hopefully from there you get to figure out which ones are your favorite and kind of card combinations that you are a fan of. Now, that said, I do need to also talk about the overall elephant in the room, and yes, here's another version of purple that I want to try out because, as you may know by now, we did see some major changes to the Japan version of the list with getting 2 cards removed, so it's not as straightforward and cut and dry. And full disclaimer, the green and yellow Bleach lists I personally haven't tested. I'm just using 2 Japan lists that I saved from events that did well and or won. So that's what I'm using as my basis for this, and I might update this later on once I have a chance to test more. But all 3 of these are kind of starting points and not hard refined as the end-all be-all for these lists. The one big thing you'll notice that we changed is going to be the color triggers, going for the 1 Ichigo to loop with the Orihime just to try to fill up your graveyard overall. So yes, purple Bleach is still going to be a graveyard-based, trash-based, sideline-based, right, style of strategy where you do actually get value for blocking this game, right? That was one of the big things of why Rukia had to get hit, is because based on the activation and then blocking, it was a free enabler for either to follow up with the Ichigo or Bakuya on the following turn. It just provided way too much value and consistency. However, I'm sure with Volume 2, we're going to get the other Rukia cards, because by then, later on, enough cards or sets will be out. You don't really have to nerf Bleach twice. That Ichigo and Rukia are going to spike up to $30, $40 again, just like they did in Japan, because that deck is going to be very, very good. So the one thing I will say, at least with these SRs overall, this deck does get buffed with Volume 2. So all 3 of these are still SRs that you're going to want. And it's probably worth talking about, at least at a high level, is, you know, what makes them so good, right? As we've talked about in other videos, generally what you're going to be wanting to look for in a card is something that is either great consistency value while also being an enabler. So that's where Rukia really checks both packages here, compared to some of the green Bleach cards we'll talk about later, where they're just a filter, but then don't have impact or something else, right? So Rukia is really at that cusp of it does both things that you really want to, so it's worth a raid slot. Bakuya is going to be your endgame finisher with the impact that you're really going to want, who also then has the ability to make sure that your 3Ks are pushing or threatening damage. And then Ichigo is just extra removal, so why not sort of thing, right? Where most decks have 4 to 6 removal, in this one you have a very solid 8, which does make a world of a difference. And also to be noted is that this does happen when played off raid, so it is also a defensive raid that works very, very well, as we've seen with like the green Kurapika deck getting to tap something down, right? So also having a good raid target that has some type of when played value that gets you extra value on defensive as well as offense can be a huge swing as well. From there, again, I want to talk about kind of the one big change that we saw, right? So in this style of deck, or anytime you go to 5 energy, you at least want 1 double energy card. If you go up to 6, I definitely would recommend at least starting with 2 playsets of double energy cards and kind of just building up and refining your numbers from there. But with color triggers, you can only have 4 of them in the deck in total. And previously, the 3 Bakuya was really nice because it lined up really well. It allowed you to get in some extra chip damage when you wanted. It comboed well with the 4 Ichigo if you played in the same turn rate. There was more things that it could do, and it also was a double energy enabler that you were just fine playing it, as well as being raid fodder, of course. But the 1-cost Ichigo, I'm pretty sure, is going to be our new main focus going forward, because it does give you the trigger to, well, 1, the color trigger, which is really good to loop itself, but 2, it gives you the option to mill a card from itself. So when we're bouncing this with the Orihime double energy, right, we're getting extra mill filter that way. And previously, we didn't really have a good color trigger target that we cared about. So getting this Ichigo into your graveyard earlier, and or sideline, I need to remind myself, keep saying, right, getting this into your sideline early, and then, you know, blocking with it, saving yourself a point of damage, looping it back off the color trigger can be really important if you find a second one. So little things like that are definitely going to start adding up, and how we have to shift the mindset mindset of purple. I think because of where it still is with the different raid targets you have, as soon as someone figures out what the consistency package is, it's going to line up very well into the field, where the other two decks we're going to talk about were already tested and proven strategies in the tier 2 quality. So by nature, if you're not sure how to pilot one or the other deck, these are now going to be a lot closer. But I still got to give the points to purple overall, because if nothing else, purple is insane in volume 2. Both versions of purple are insane in volume 2, which are built off these purple SR cards we were just talking about. So something to keep in mind in the future. If you just want a more control heavy graveyard shenanigans style playing of deck, then definitely pick these up whenever you can, so they don't spike later on and then you're trying to pay like 30 or 40 or 50 bucks per SR, because that just feel bad and nobody wants to deal with that. Moving on from there, we have green, which is the 13 court guard. And this is one that has two very different play styles. But in generally, as we've seen with green strategies, they do have a little ramp up to get to their top end. And this one in particular all has a synergy that cares about how many you have in field. And there are some other specific cards that say, hey, bump another TCG guy on your field for 500, right? Things of that nature. So there's other parts that play off one another, but in general, this is a little bit more of a interesting board control mix. And then if you go to the top end, you'll get to have the impact as well, but we'll talk about that in just a little bit. So for green, kind of the big things I think a lot of people are going to gravitate towards are these two different sides of it. So Toshiro, a lot of people already know, and before people ask, yes, technically, the replacement text is worded correctly on the card. I also don't like it. There's also a FAQ on the website. Save me the comments. Trust me, I'm also frustrated, but grammarly, it's technically correct. There's an FAQ, etc., etc. But Toshiro is really great. Although it doesn't have that impact, or it doesn't have the removal side of it completely, it does have the ability to rest something, which means you can get a damage in that way, and then also trigger your opponent's energy line to all be rested, which means if they were trying to promote out of their energy line on the next turn, they're not going to be able to. So Toshiro, as it plays out, while based on the effect, might not be all that exciting compared to either the straight impact or straight hard removal that we get for some of the other raid targets. But because of the disruption that it allows, and can, setting off your opponent even a single turn is huge in this game. So if your opponent doesn't have a way around this card or plan around it correctly, they're going to be in a lot of pain. And then the other one I think is just really fun is the Yachiru, and again, spoiler, I haven't seen any Bleach yet, so I apologize. I'm probably butchering a lot of these names, and Kenpachi, right? So Kenpachi, while being a SR, being something that you have to play to the front line, yes, it does have a removal when you play it to the field, so that can really help. So again, another deck that has just access to more removal, but what's really important about this card in particular is that we do have a 1-drop that goes with it that can effectively give it haste, right? So up first, you have to play the Kenpachi, get the when played effect, which then also has a requirement of make sure that you have 6 of the 13 court guard squads, or TCGS, on your field to get the 4K removal. And then you can play the 1-drop, which is going to switch it to active, and then now you're also swinging with a 4K that has impact. So technically on the turn you play it, right, you're going to get that damage either way, so the impact doesn't matter as much, but you're getting the chance to free up a slot and also make sure your other guys are swinging for meaningful damage, that the impact could matter, and if they don't answer it immediately, spoiler, you're able to then get the impact on the next turn to clear through some damage. So a really, really strong combo that, if you're the kind of person who likes to set up your field and make sure you're getting, these big payoffs, then Green Bleach really lines into that pretty well, while staying on theme of making sure that you have all of your 13 court guards together and getting various effects with them. Now, the other thing I do have to mention, of course, is the 7-drop. Now, flavor-wise, look, you know me, I love green Kurapika. I love the big green energy decks in general in Union Arena. We get the Gamera Rebirth, like, green always has this really cool, flashy top end, right? However, this deck does require a bit more of a setup and requires a lot of the same cards that you're going to be playing anyways in the other version. And again, the turn you play it, it has impact. It's a 5K body. You get to rush all your cards forward. They get a big attack buff. And then what do you do, right? That's kind of the problem with the deck overall. And Kurapika has a similar weakness in that it has only a 5K threshold, which is really nice for blocking your opponent's 4Ks. But if your opponent knows that you're going to be playing into things like Yamato or Kurapika, they're going to save those special triggers just for those cards and then use the other cards in the deck to handle the rest of the board. So that is a little bit of a downside, but if you're able to get those Kurapikas early or the Yamato early, which is threatening damage while also saving you a point of life, it can be enough to win you the game as well. And then the other thing I got to give a shout out for is the 5 energy version as well, that it generates energy even if it's on your front line, which is super important for making the strategy come online. And then it's also a 4K that you can play relatively early to the front of your board. So if you want to play this deck, you're likely looking at the Unohana raid target as well as Yamato, or like your 4 and 4, because then the Uno lets you go into the Yamato because it's a 1 action point reduction. And there's certain combos that you can set up that way. But again, the thing that I really want to stress is that for green, it's really about building up your board and realizing those, 1, 2, or sometimes 3 if you have like the Bankai as well, combos that you can set up to really give you the advantage and push through for some damage. So the list I've showed again was just one that I haven't personally tested, but something that has done well in Japan. So I'm using that as my own starting point. And of course, when we get to some gameplay videos, I'll be trying out both versions of these as well. And then last but not least, we have Yellow Bleach. And when I say this deck can be built literally any way that you want, truly, like pick the raid targets, pick the other 4 or 5 energy stuff, like whatever you want, make sure you have 8 to 10, make sure you follow like my deck building video for like how to build out a deck, and do whatever you want. So yellow is all about resting your opponent's board or tapping it down at key points to get value and push through for some damage. So this does play well into the other games that we've seen from Bandai that have yellow more like board control and tapping things down. There's no healing, at least as of yet, thankfully. But again, it can be very difficult for your opponent to block down or block effectively when you're removing a bunch of their 3Ks, where now they have to suddenly give up their 4K body. And we have the Yawatch as well in this list, the 4-2 Yawatch, that also says, hey, I can keep things rested as well. So much like the green list that we've seen from Toshiro, being able to lock something down for a turn can be really important for putting your opponent on the back foot. But for this one in particular, you either get to sideline something if it's rested, you draw extra cards if it's rested. We have good removal if they have a rated target that doesn't rely on Yawatch. So there's a lot of interesting things they can do about it. Also, from a quick side note that I meant to mention on the green part that I'm going to mention now, is that technically both of these lists, when I got them from the Japan tournaments that I saved, were only playing 2 or 3 of the final trigger. And truthfully, that might be correct. I'm going to be very honest. I don't know. It's something I haven't tested with a lot. Every deck that I've played in Union Arena over the last couple months, I've always just played for final triggers because getting the extra turn extenders and lining up some of the combos you can do really do matter. But in more of these low-to-the-ground aggressive strategies where you don't need those extra turn extenders sometime, I can definitely see wanting to cut back on a final trigger or 2. But again, something that from a overall introducing the decks and letting people play them standpoint, I'm always going to recommend 4 final triggers and 4 special triggers. So what makes yellow special? Well, everything, kind of. So the 3 themes that we'll note here are Yawatch, which is going to have damage 2, and it does strip the top raid card. I've seen a little bit of confusion around this. Both Yawatch and Paladin's Necklace from Blue Hunter x Hunter have the same wording. When they specify that you only remove the top rated card to put it to their sideline or bounce back to their hand for Paladin's Necklace, the card underneath it stays on the field. Now, there are other cards that we'll see with JJK that will either bounce something or remove something. Then, yes, the card underneath it will go to the sideline or trash. So do keep that in mind. It is a little bit different. But Yawatch also then has the ability to give himself damage 2, as well as rest something if you're not peeling a raid target from your opponent. So it does cost 6 energy. It is a little bit on the higher end. And then I also want to give a shout out to Basby, which is able to get double damage. That also can draw a card, so it's good for cycling in yellow, which is really important. And also, there are some other cards in yellow that care about your opponent's hand size. So Basby is a great discard outlet. We actually covered this in a versus video that we have. So if you want to see the yellow or one version of Yellow Bleach in action, go check out our gameplay videos. But Basby is definitely one that surprised me. And also, it's just a draw trigger, which is always really great. So getting that extra cycle is really neat. And then Asnote, I believe is how you pronounce that. Let me know in the comments. I'm sure I butchered that. But it has impact, and then it also just has the ability to rest something for 3K forever, right? Just as long as it's on the front line and it's being a threat, which means you're able to line this up with some of the other yellow cards, and this is why I went for the other one with the 2-drop that lets you rest something. So there are going to be turns where you have Asnot, you rate him up, you play the 2-drop to your backline just to rest something else, you rest something with his ability, and say, okay, sorry, you only have, 2 blockers, and I have 2 double damage guys maybe. Yeah, that's game, right? So yellow is more about finding those pockets and really understanding how you can get in that chip damage while not, hard removal like we have out of purple or some of the other colors. So you do have to line up your strategy that way. So if you're someone who really wants to think about how combat matters and how you can force your opponent to block, Yellow Bleach, you're going to have so much fun with it because there's so many different ways to build it that I couldn't possibly have them all in this video, but at least I gave a good starting point. And then hopefully if you have a chance to check out some of the other SRs that come in and out of the deck, you can check those as well for other deck building options. But with that, that is a quick recap of the different Bleach archetypes. Again, not as refined as we've seen for the Hunter x Hunter video. Again, make sure to go check that out if you're interested in Hunter x Hunter decks, but something that I am very excited to start digging into and playing. So this week, the booster sets do launch at your local game store. It does look like some hanger packs will be available at Target, Walmart, Meijer, GameStop, Hot Topic, some other places I'm sure I'm forgetting off the top of my head. So if you just want to buy a couple packs and live for the gamble, you can definitely do that as well. But otherwise, we have a couple more unboxing videos that I'll do for later this week. And then gameplay will start maybe towards the end of the week if I have time to put together a video, or starting next week, it's all going to be gameplay focused for the next 6 weeks until JJK focusing on Hunter x Hunter and Bleach. So again, if you have a favorite deck that you want to see played on the channel, let me know. I'll cue that up for you. But otherwise, my friends, stay safe, stay hydrated, and we'll see you in the next video. Cheers.